I'm actually really excited to make this video. I'm running all over my basement while I'm trying to do some laundry. Because the video I posted yesterday in regards to Mr. Tony Gaskins and what I thought of his message, his content, and my first impressions based off of 5 or 6 clips that I watched yesterday that were each about 2 to 3 minutes long. I've gotten a little bit of backlash. Some of the people jumped in the comments, was very supportive, but also gave me their perspective on the matter. Thank you guys. I appreciate all the comments. That's what my platform is all about, is just opening up dialogue and having conversations and learning from each other, from one another. And ultimately expanding the mind. That's what I'm all about. So I finished the episode that he had on, I forget, the hardly initiated. That's where these clips came from that I watched on TikTok yesterday. So the hardly initiated podcast. So if you guys haven't had an opportunity, go check it out. I plan to listen to some more episodes. I also plan on following Tony Gaskins' podcast as well, so I can look a little bit more into the man. Now, I said a couple things that a lot of people were commenting on. The first thing I want to touch on is I said that he caters to women. Now, again, I'll preface this, and this is the last time I'm going to say it. I was basing that video that I made yesterday off of those clips that I saw. So at that time, I hadn't finished the episode. I didn't get to look into what books he wrote and all that stuff. I am aware of those things because it's in his biography, on his social platforms, but I didn't do none of that. But I was so ingratiated in the videos and the content that I had seen, much like anybody that's scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, wherever. They're only going to see these clips. They're only going to see these snippets of these episodes of him speaking in whatever he's speaking on in that moment. And most of the people are going to run with that idea. I posted the video based on what I watched, but I had every intention of going back and listening to the full episode. But I think it's very, very important that us as content creators, we're very conscious and intentional with what we're putting out there, so people can formulate opinions of whether they want to follow us, whether they want to bitch at us, or whether they want to, support us or spread our message. And from his TikTok, all the things that I was watching, that was the perspective that I was getting, that his platform mainly caters to women. And I wasn't entirely wrong on that assumption. In the beginning of the episode on the Hardly Initiated podcast, they start talking about who listens to them and what their audience is like. And he states that over 95% of his YouTube audience is women, which makes perfect sense because he's talking about men. So if women want to learn about men, you go to a man. But the content that you run into for a man can come off as judgmental, or it could come off as bashing, or it can come off as unempathetic. You know what I mean? And this is solely basing it off of if you're seeing what you're seeing on your timeline, not going and listening to full episodes. Let's be honest, most people don't. Most people see news article headlines and they run with them. They'll just believe whatever's on the headline, even though it's there to catch your attention. You know what I mean? And I think that's important because it does get eyes on whatever's being spoken about. It gets ears listening to whatever's being spoken about. But us as people who digest what is being given to us, we also got to go and do our due diligence, in which I did. Another thing that was also stated about their audience, the Hardly Initiated podcast, about 70% of their audience is also women. So even though it's a platform based on empowering people and trying to raise awareness as far as how to build healthy relationships and be healthy within oneself, they're still attracting more of a female crowd than a male crowd. And even at the end of the episode, he says, how do we get more men to see these? Because this is who it's for, and he asked Tony that. Now, I don't remember exactly how he responded, but they were like, how do we get this in front of more men? because this is very useful information, in which I totally agree, which is how I think I found it. Because I'm always looking for things to help me level up as a person, as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a brother, as a son, as an uncle, all that. You know what I'm saying? So, I guess that's how it popped up on my timeline, because I'm constantly searching for new information, new viewpoints of how to see things, and how to work through my problems, and overcome my trials that I deal with on a daily basis. And I'm very happy that I ran into Tony, because as I said in the first video, even though some people think that I was basically disagreeing with the man entirely, I think he can be very useful to me, and his message very useful to me, and his life experience and education that he has, and knowledge that he has to offer, I think can be very useful to myself, as well as men all over the world, not just black men, but men all over the world, and women. I was wrong about saying that, he only makes the videos for women. When I listened to the podcast, he was speaking to both men and women. So I was wrong in that aspect, but basing it off those, it seems like it only caters to a woman crowd. So I think, I don't know if he's going to see this video, but I think if he can be a little bit more intentional with what he's putting in those videos, as far as how he's promoting them on social media clips when people are scrolling, I think he could reach more men if he's being a little bit more intentional with what he's putting out there. There was one of the parts in the podcast episode where he says, "I'm never judging you. I've been you. I've probably done things worse than you." I think men should hear that, just as well as they should hear how we can improve to be better husbands and better fathers. Men need to hear that. Men need to hear that you've also been through something. I watched 5, I'm pretty sure it was 6, but I know 5 for sure. I watched 5 videos and nothing told me that he was a man that had done anything wrong. Even to the point, I watched one video where he says, "A man does not have my respect until he is married and faithful." And you go into the comment section and it's nothing but men. And they're all saying, "Who the fuck needs your approval? Who asked for your respect?" Yada, yada, yada. That's how men are. He knows this. He knows this as a man through trials and tribulations. He knows men are defensive. He knows that when men feel like they're being pushed, they're ready to push back. You know what I'm saying? And if you want to really reach men, you gotta be a little bit more intentional with what you're putting out there. And I think a lot of the things that he puts out there could be helpful to men, but it also could rub them the wrong way, in which some of the things rub me the wrong way. And some of them rub me the wrong way because they were true, but some of them rub me the wrong way because I felt like a huge part of what he was saying was missing something. And it was missing the message of love that he preaches, which I heard, and the message of "I am not without flaw," which he said. And I think those things are very important for people who just mindlessly scrolling on social media looking for something to entertain themselves. I think that is also something that should be pushed out there, in which you're not really going to see on his social platforms. I checked his Facebook and his Instagram, and I didn't really see anything like that. I just seen him coming for men, in which it's not necessarily coming for men, but if you don't listen to him in entirety, then it seems like he's coming for men. Another thing, he says, and they spoke about how, well, he spoke on how when you're scrolling on these platforms and you see something or you hear something and it catches your eye, typically we're going to hear it and it's going to be law. And unless we're willing to disprove it and do work to disprove it, 9 times out of 10 is going to stick with us. And he mentioned that in a segment where he was talking about Kevin Samuels. Now, we all know who Kevin Samuels is. We all know what Kevin Samuels was known for. And even though Kevin Samuels had a very large following of people who liked what he pushed, he also was hated in many cases. And he said he's never watched a full episode of Kevin Samuels speaking. He's just seen this 2 to 3 minute clip on social media, much like myself. And he said that it was so impactful that he started to look at his own wife differently. And eventually he checked himself And he had to bring himself back down to earth saying, this is the woman I chose to love. This is the woman that I chose to spend the rest of my life with, and he had to, like I said, that he said, in which you can go and verify on this podcast episode, was that he had to peel back the layers and set his mind right. You know what I'm saying? So it goes back to being intentional with what you're putting out there and the message that you want received from the people that you want to receive it. If you want men to listen, to be better fathers and be better husbands, especially black men who have suffered for freaking decades as far as missing fathers and drugs and incarceration rates and poverty and all these type of things, I think you gotta be picking certain parts out of your episodes that empowers men to want to be better versions of themselves. And when I went through his TikTok and I watched these things, and I went through his Instagram and I watched these things, I didn't really get that feel, even though he is a man that I am going to listen to on a regular basis, because after listening to him speak for an hour and a half, I loved it. I loved what he had to say. And I resonated with pretty much everything he had to say. I'm not as religious as he is, and I shouldn't even say religious, but I don't carry myself in the exact same manner as he does. But the way that he carries himself isn't something that I'm like, I don't want to be associated with that, because he seems like a man who carries himself to very high standards, and he sets very high standards for himself, and he's not oblivious to the fact that he is a man, and that wasn't something that I got watching those clips. It made me feel like he was somebody who's coming off as holier than thou. Somebody in the comment section mentioned Derek Jackson. He was kind of giving me those type of vibes when I'm watching these clips, and we all know how that played out for him. You know what I'm saying? One thing he said was, a man's greatest strength is his gentleness. And look, I got chills right now. That's a fact. That's coming from, I'm only 28 years old. I have 3 children. I'm married. I've been with my wife, and I have been together since since high school, since we were 16 years old. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been married for going on 4 years now. You know what I'm saying? This is the love of my life. We done built an empire together, and we're still building. We're only on a foundational level, and it's an empire. You know what I'm saying? So, but I'm only 28, and in my early 20s, I was very destructive. Even up until this point, I'm not even gonna say it, like 5 months ago, I did some wild shit, and I'm not proud of it. And it caused rifts in my marriage. You know what I'm saying? But I got somebody that I chose, and she chose me, the good, the bad, the ugly, and she's willing to stick it out. You know what I mean? And I'm eternally grateful for that, for real. But I had to learn to be gentle, because all these things that I had buried so deep because of what I had experienced as a child in my teen years, in my early 20s, and expectations that I put on myself, and how I let world standards and expectations of me dictate how I move, and not being true to myself, in which he spoke on, getting to know yourself. And I've spent the better half of the last 4 years since the pandemic getting to know myself and sitting with myself and really combing through who I want to be and what I am and who I am and what my purpose is and things of that nature. And every day is a learning experience, you know what I mean? The work never ends. Just like in marriage, it never ends. So for myself, I got to continue to reinvent myself. I got to continue to grow. I got to continue to educate myself. I got to continue to spiritually pour into myself. You know what I mean? So that way I can be the man that my wife signed up to spend the rest of her days with. But I love that. I think that's something that I think men need to hear. That's something that I did not see on his social media platform. Now, I only went back a couple weeks, but I didn't see it. That's important. Men need to hear that it's okay to be gentle. Some men have not been validated to feel like it's okay to have feelings. You know what I mean? And that was something I spoke about in the first episode. We gotta have somebody sometimes tell us it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel. It's okay for you to be upset. It's okay for you not to have the answer right now. It's okay. It's okay to be a human. It's okay to be a man. And that's something that he could be pushing. And that's something that I think could help his his man audience, his audience, I think it can help it grow tenfold. You know what I'm saying? Just validating men to know that it's okay to feel. Because he's somebody that he labeled himself. He said, I was toxic. I was a womanizer. There was a time that I had sex with 3 different women in a 24-hour span. And it's not okay. There's a whole segment. They spent like 20 minutes on it. And he was asking him, why do the men glorify being single and just running through women? You know what I mean? And he's like, because men feel empty. And even though in that moment they're getting some type of satisfaction, it's empty. And they know it's empty. So they try to fill their lives with all these women and all these numbers and all this and all that. And none of it matters, because when they leave and you leave a house or they leave your bedroom, you're still empty. That's something that needs to be pushed. Men need to hear that shit. Especially that shit would have made such a difference for me personally. Because I was somebody, I've been with the same woman since I was 16 years old. And there was a part of me that I got friends that went off to college and got to do what they did. I got friends that got to travel the world. I got friends that get to party all the time. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, yo, I'm 20 years old and I'm raising a son. You know what I mean? All my friends out there living, they getting to spend time meeting women everywhere and traveling and this and that. And I thought I was missing out on something. But 8 years later, you know what I'm saying? I got everything they looking for. But when I'm 23, 24 years old, I'm still thinking I'm missing something. And I didn't have no man to tell me, yo, you not missing nothing. There's nothing out there. There's nothing out there for you. You out there playing, he called it Russian roulette. You out there playing Russian roulette. Nobody ever told me that. I ain't had no man to tell me that. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of 20-year-old men that are just like me, that was just like him, that need to hear from another man that has been through it and tested and has built something for himself and is proud of himself. Say, there is nothing out there that you are missing. If you have a good woman at home, you cultivate that. That's what men need to see on their timelines. Not being made to feel like they're shit out of luck or that they're worthless because they don't have these things, these attributes that you're talking about. You know what I mean? And that was the whole preface of my video. There was another question that I want to touch on. He said, how does a woman know she has a good dude? And he starts out answering that question with, I've had the most trouble in my life with that. Emotional intelligence. And then he goes on to expound on that. And that was something that I touched on, that men aren't emotionally intelligent. And typically it takes a woman that is willing to stick by your side to help you grow some emotional intelligence and feel comfortable talking about your emotions and working through and processing those emotions, those very traumatic experiences, those hardships that you had to deal with all by yourself. You know what I'm saying? And I was speaking on that. And yes, I'm more responsible for my overall emotional intelligence and well-being than anybody. But my wife is so fucking vital in that process for me that I know any man out there with a strong woman that stands behind him and supports him and loves him, I guarantee she do the same thing for him. When the rest of the world turns its back on us, I get to come home and walk in my door and I got a woman and I got my 3 children and I got my animals and I get to walk into my castle and feel like I have the entire world right here. Men need that. Men need that. And that's also something that I would love to see while I'm scrolling on TikTok or Instagram. I would love to see a video of him talking about that, highlighting that point. You know what I mean? About the importance of emotional intelligence in men, so that way we can be better husbands and fathers. He grew up with a mom and a dad in the household. I grew up with a mother. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, keep the lights on, and sometimes they still got cut off. I had a sister who was older than I got a sister that's older than me by 4 years, and in many cases she was mom. And it's not fair at all. But what can my sister that's only 4 years older than me with no kids and a kid herself teach me? You know what I'm saying? My father I met when I was 14. And he wasn't in the most worst shape, but you could also tell that he was a man that if he shot high, he ended up landing very low. And he never climbed back up the ladder again. And by the time I was 19 years old with my own son, my dad had nothing else he can teach me. He had nothing to offer. Nothing. And then my dad ended up falling into addiction, getting beaten nearly to the brink of his life, and now he has mental issues. So what can he teach me? I understand that it's a social media platform, but people like Tony Gaskins can be very impactful for young black men, much like myself. And I think that if he's a little bit more intentional, or whoever's managing his pages, because I don't know if it's him, but if they could be a little bit more intentional with the messages that they're pushing, I think that 95% YouTube audience that of women that follow him, I think that will begin to trickle down, and not necessarily trickle down. I don't think he's gonna lose the women, because I think the women need to hear what he has to say too. And I just found out my wife listens to him, and my wife never even said anything to me. My wife never told me a thing. You know what I'm saying? But maybe the things that my wife was pouring into me, she got from him. You know, and that's very, very possible. I'm going to talk to my wife about it today and figure it out, because there's been times where I'm just like, yo, you God's gift. You God's gift. You know, first person to ever make me feel like it was okay to have feelings and cry. First, at 28 years. Yo, there's plenty, there's hundreds of thousands of men out there that if they run into the videos that I ran into, might not be so receptive to the message. They also might not be inclined to go and hear the rest of the message, or hear the message in entirety. And I think just reframing, or at least picking a couple videos of each, you know what I mean? One trying to hold men accountable, and then another one trying to let men know that it's okay to be at where they're at in their lives, but that there's still progress to be made. I think could do a world of good. Actually, I wrote a couple of notes here, you know, because I was very involved in the listening process. I really wanted to come on here and set any record straight for anybody that had any preconceived notions about me. I mean, I don't know you guys, but I do think that my platform that I'm building could be very influential, and I also want to make sure that the messages that I push are aligned with my heart and my intention. So, you know, that's the reason for some of these notes. And then the other thing was, this is an hour and a half podcast, you know what I mean? I didn't want to lose, like, there was so many things that they touched on. It was so informative. I highly advise, I'm gonna post the link in this description, but I highly advise anybody that sees this video that don't know who Tony Gaskins are, that's never heard of the Hardly Initiated podcast, go check it out. Definitely go check out the episode that he's on. Very informative. And it makes you self-reflect as you're listening. I think we all can grow. We all can grow, whether it's small areas or big areas. We need to grow. We all can grow. I want to make sure I covered everything. There was some things that I wrote. I took extra notes on here. Like I said, he said in one part, he was like, you know, men will put financial stress on our shoulders. That's easy, but not emotional regulation of the household. You know, and I was going to expound on that to combat some of the arguments that I had, but I don't want to argue with people. I want to do the same thing he's trying to do. And I want to do the same thing that everybody that jumped in the comments on the other video, I want to do the same thing that they were trying to do for me, which is inform, empower, and share knowledge and wisdom. You know what I mean? So I don't even want to get into that. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know that men have a hard time expressing themselves. Men have a hard time expressing themselves because they don't feel safe. Men have a hard time expressing themselves because they might not have the emotional intelligence to articulate the way that they feel without being destructive, whether physically or self or to other people. You know what I'm saying? And if we really want to help our fellow man, our fellow brother, our husbands, our sons, whatever, if we want to help them, if we truly want to help them, we have to share information like this, and we have to push the right messages so that way it reaches the people and they can accept the message, even if it's a hard pill to swallow, that they still feel inclined to go hear the message in entirety and not just say, fuck this dude, I don't need his respect. You know what I mean? That's not what it's about. And I could tell the man is pure heart. I could tell he's pure hearted. You know what I mean? He seems like he's very proud of the steps that he's got. And he's taken, and on that podcast, there was so many times where he flipped the script and he put the camera on himself and he said, I did this and I did that and I got money, and you know, and I don't come from money. So even though I make 7 figures, one of my downfalls is I'm bad with money. You know what I mean? And he likes to eat Popeyes, even though, you know, he has this philosophy of taking care of the 3 B's, which is, what was it? Body. It was, it was body. I knew I should have wrote it. It was body, business. Oh, body, brand, and was it brain? I think it was brain. And it was essentially like, everybody, we should take care of all 3 of them, and if we can get all 3 in a line, then, you know, essentially we're walking the right path. But most people only have 2 of them. And he was saying that, he was like, you know, most women might have the brand and might have the brain, but they don't got the body. And most men will have the body and they'll have the brand but won't have no brain. You know what I'm saying? Like, meaning as in like emotional intelligence and things like that. The message was very dope. The message was very powerful. Anybody that jumped in the comments, I hope you guys stick around, because this is what I'm all about. You know what I'm saying? I'm always gonna come on here and I'm gonna let you know when I think I'm always gonna admit my faults where I'm wrong. I'm always gonna try to listen. Well, I'm always gonna listen, and I'm always gonna try to grow. I'm always gonna try to hear people's opinions, and we can let bygones be bygones. We can agree to disagree. You know what I'm saying? Always keep it respectful. At the end of the day, I think we're all, anybody that's going to be on my platform is going to be pushing in the same direction that I am, which is spreading love, spreading knowledge, you know what I'm saying? And creating space for people to share their experience and expertise, you know what I'm saying? So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure y'all follow. Make sure y'all share. Make sure y'all show love. Big shout out to the Hardly Initiated podcast. Thank you guys for working hard to get the man Tony Gaskins up there. Make sure y'all go follow their podcast. Follow my podcast too. Tony Gaskins also got a podcast, so you can go follow that. Go check out some of his books. I guess I'm gonna go do the same thing. I've never read it, so I don't got nothing to offer other than this is what the man does. I trust his message after listening to him speak. I agree. I think we all could learn something from it. And even if you can't, at least you get a different perspective. You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to keep hearing the same thing over and over again. The message gets stale. And not only that, if you're listening to the same thing, you're gonna be doomed to repeat the same actions you've been repeating. Peace and love to all. Shoot for the moon. If you miss, you're still amongst the stars. Peace.